Right, good evening, everyone. Wonderful to have you on board. I was just saying to Prof. Benny earlier, it's the wonders of technology allow us to reach a far wider scale and scope of people than had we been congregated in a conference center somewhere in the middle of Johannesburg. So a warm welcome to you all. Lovely to have you with us. We are delighted to be partnering with Da Vinci Institute of Business Leadership. We have been in touch with them over a long period of time, and to their entire leadership, Prof. Benny, Prof. H.B. Klopper, Dr. Marla Koonen, Trishan, the rest of the team, welcome. It is wonderful to be partnering with you on this occasion to address, I'm sure, what is going to be a most enlightening and informative session. Folks, we are recording the session. I'm obliged to let you know we will be making a copy of the recording available to our members and partners, and it will also be available on our website after 48 hours, 72 hours possibly. So we'll cover off all the legislative requirements. I would ask, in the interest of maintaining bandwidth and ensuring the integrity of our signal, that you switch off your cameras and mute your mics when you're not on. Please, I've been reminded by my colleagues and friends at Da Vinci that this is an interactive session and we are not going to curtail the Q&A. So please start framing those questions, formulating them, and we'll deal with them during the Q&A session later. Guys, it's wonderful to be able to present to you on a subject such as this. We have heard a lot. It's been challenging times. We've lived through an unprecedented week in the history of South Africa, and perhaps it's opportune and appropriate that we now change gears and we move into something a little bit more positive, hopefully, Prof. Benny, no pressure, that we can start seeing life through a different lens. And the questions we pose around the dinner table, and I'm sure are all going to be addressed this evening. So without any further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over to Dr. Marla Koonen, who will do the introductions. Over to you, Marla.
Thank you so much, Mark. I don't know what happened to my pretty picture, Ben, that you said I had. I have now lost my nice picture. Apologies for that. I think we spoke earlier around saying, Mark, you were speaking about the fact that to connect like this and the fact that we can connect like this is really quite amazing. And I think from my perspective, what I love about these type of sessions is, and what we speak of a lot at Da Vinci, is around co-creation and connecting. But tonight, the discussion being on the fifth industrial revolution is something that we really speak about extensively at Da Vinci, and that is because of that whole dance between humanity and the human element and technology and how these aspects can interchange and play. And so, Unati, I was really glad to see that you were the guest, that you were going to also be speaking, because as a people-centered leader like you are, I think it is incredible that we are able to join with you this evening as well. And I will introduce Unati later, because this absolute synergy between people and technology is going to be something that is really critical going forward. At Da Vinci, we don't like to speak of values, so we speak about things that we value. And I really hope that after Prof. Ben's discussion with you this evening and in our interaction today, that you're able to hold on to some of the things that we really value. And those are, for example, harnessing curiosity. I think that it's always curious when we present on the fifth industrial revolution. Prof. Ben will say the first question people ask is, but we haven't even survived the fourth. Inclusivity is really important, co-creation, and obviously just this transdisciplinarity, that we all come from these different disciplines, different environments, and different walks of life. And that is really critical in terms of understanding the fifth industrial revolution. So this evening, Prof. Ben Anderson is going to be discussing the fifth industrial revolution and the 10 megatrends. And I really look forward to introducing him. And I'm going to give you an introduction that is a little bit sort of eccentric and a little bit different. And that is because there are no words that could ever properly describe Prof. Ben. So I have a quote in my office that I've had since I very started being an educator. And it is, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, I know most people attribute this quote to Peter Parker from the Spider-Man franchise, but few understand that it was actually coined by Voltaire, the French writer and public activist, who actually defined the period of enlightenment. And I think we can all agree in current times, enlightenment is what we all need. So the reason I love this quote is actually for its dichotomy and the very epitome of what Prof. Ben Anderson represents to me, and I hope to you when you've heard him speak. And that is someone who is timeless and able to reach all generations and be inclusive, just like the Spider-Man franchise. He certainly keeps a youthful exuberance in all that he does. But importantly for me is the reference to Voltaire, which is critical. Because Voltaire, and looking at it from this perspective, it's about enlightening people to embrace their shadow. And I hope today that that is what you will all be able to do. Embracing the shadow is seeing both the light and the darkness within us. Collecting the dots, we often speak of at Da Vinci, and that is about stretching our minds beyond what we think is possible. And we have a depth and insight that would then be quite unparalleled. And in order to embrace the fifth industrial revolution, we will definitely have to have this. But finally, I want to say that Prof. Ben takes so seriously that with power and knowledge, we have a great sense of responsibility. All of us in this virtual room this evening do, as leaders within the communities that we serve and the environments in which we lead. So I've seldom met someone who questions the social return on investment of every single thing he does, whether personal or professional. And so I hand over to you the first speaker this evening, Professor Ben Anderson, who's the CEO of the Da Vinci Institute. Prof. Ben?
Thanks, Marla. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the colleagues making the time to have a bit of a reflection on our busy schedules. So I thought of talking about the 5IR as working towards a sustainable society. Needless to say that the notion of a sustainable society is almost a misnomer. In 1970, the period 1970 to 2016, it's recorded that 68% of the biodiversity has been destroyed, in the main by you and me. With all our luxury and all our comforts, especially our home comforts, our travel comforts, we've destroyed 68% of what was there in diversity into 1970. 2016 has been yesterday. So when we talk about 5R in the context of a sustainable society, it's very challenging, even for me as Da Vinci, because I'm not sure that we can be true to the notion of a sustainable society. But I do hope that in this discussion, if we could consider a fifth wave or industrial revolution, that the dance between us as humans and our energy fields and that of technology will create some magic so that we could attempt at least to answer to the question of being responsible citizens of society. In the main, I want to just very quickly talk about the evolution, the evolvement of the industrial revolutions, the mega trends that we currently see emerging, then about the construct of connecting versus collecting the dots, which is nothing new, but for some reason something that we struggle as Homo Sapiens to embrace appropriately. And then just to share 3 conceptual frameworks which I believe can be considered and assisted me in my life to understand the notion of connecting versus collecting, seeing the bigger picture ecosystemically, which is the notion of order and unorder and disorder as the one construct, but also the construct of coordinate, collaborate, and cooperate. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then to Da Vinci to talk a bit about the TIPS managerial leadership framework. So if we look at the first construct that I want to share is about the evolvement of the industrial revolutions. And we've seen that as from the 1700s, when we had the first industrial revolution, and how it evolved to the second industrial revolution, which we saw in the 1870s, And then we went on to the third industrial revolution, which we experienced most of us during the, the 1900s or the mid 1900s, which was all about technology. And then we have the fourth industrial revolution, which people would say is current. Well, in my mind, I find it sad that even this morning I sat in a session with colleagues from representing the front leaders from technology and innovation in South Africa. And I still hear people talking about the fourth industrial revolution, as if we have not gone beyond the fourth. So the fifth industrial revolution acknowledges all these developments, as you would see on that slide, from mechanization, industrialization, how people became working in factories, and how the power was becoming more in the hands of the people who actually managed the people who were working in those factories and who were manufacturing, who were the people who were in charge of the creation of the technology, actually became more powerful. But if we really look and really dissect the industrial revolutions as they've evolved up till the fourth, there's very little humanity. As far as I'm concerned, there's less humane engagements in the industrial revolutions. So when I hear that we as South Africans want to talk about let's get more factories, then I think to myself, how on in what revolution do we want to go? Do we want to go backwards? Because we don't need to fulfill completely each revolution cycle to move to a next. I think we can go into the fifth industrial revolution, as some working spaces are already, without having mastered all the detailed requirements of the fourth technology-focused industrial revolution. I'm saddened to think that we still think that if Africa as an emerging economy really wants to come into mainstream, they must become more manufactured orientated, become more interested in manufacturing things for people. Well, I'm a bit worried about that, because that is really about yesterday. So I hope that we can reconsider the notion of getting stuck in the fourth industrial revolution, take cognizance of all the previous revolutions, and maybe piece together an interesting dance between us as humans and those aspects which the technology has brought to life over the past century. Africa in particular has got a huge and a vast and a rich culture of humaneness. Many speak of Ubuntu. So where is that power of that humaneness that Africa can bring to the world stage? I hope that we, as people residing in Africa, will consider the benefits and the potential energy that the dance between humanity and technology can bring in the rise of the fifth industrial revolution. So that's the one idea. But then the second one, I want to sort of go back and say, let's look at the megatrends. There are certain megatrends that we're seeing in the last 10 to 15 years. Digitization, and I don't need to talk to you as fellows in this conversation about the details, but it covers all spheres of life: music, logistics, banking, healthcare, agriculture, where we get the dance between the algorithm and the androrhythm. And digitization has brought beautiful combinations of algorithms and androrhythms. Algorithms of numbers and androrhythms of human energy fields. The whole trend of mobilization, that technology is moving closer to us. We sat in front of big desktops, it coming to our hand. We've got a handset now. Some of you probably this afternoon not even sitting in front of a computer, but having your cell phone, your mobile. We're getting it to our wrist, we're getting it to our face. The AR, the VR, the brain-computer interfaces, the BCIs. These are all typical mobilizations, trends, that things are moving differently at a different pace with different technology. Then screenification, the interface revolution, where we moved from paper to screen to telephone calls. And yet today we're talking in video. Disintermediation, which I think is a critical megatrend that developing economies in particular should take note of, to cut out the middleman. Apple, Spotify, Baidu, YouTube were all disruptors. And they all disrupted the record companies who ultimately earn 90% of the income of the artists, which have changed that space. So in what world am I? I'm in education. What is disintermediation potentially going to do to education? Well, to be honest with you, I'm very aware that there don't need to be universities 10 years from here, because knowledge can be obtained and education through other means than through the traditional university. Why would kids need to go to school the way they're going to school? What if somebody comes up like Finland, is playing with very innovative ideas around playfulness around schooling as opposed to educating kids? They're returning to the notion of let them play. Well, that construct will most probably disintermediate education in Finland as the way you and I see it today. Robotization, that's where everything is converging into something spectacular. Creations, we've seen many of that. And then you get transformation in the megatrend sense, where it's becoming something else beyond change and beyond innovation. So BMW may today be a car manufacturer, but BMW is most probably positioning itself as a mobile manufacturer. How do I move not just Ben from point A to B, but Ben's needs from point A to B? So how are you and I in our different industry sectors considering the notion of transformation, not in a political sense as we may have got to know it of recent times, especially in South Africa, but even globally, but transformation where things move beyond change and beyond innovation? I'm not sure that universities, of which Da Vinci is one, is necessarily a center of education expertise anymore. I'm not sure that's what our role will be from a transformation point of view. Yes, we should open and facilitate the openness and probe the openness of people's minds, but I'm not sure that I need a traditional university curriculum to establish that. I think there are already placed in the market on education that I've indicated to you. Coursera is a great example. That's a modern day take on university. Get Started in South Africa is another example. It's already there. Intelligization, well, that is from being disconnected to being connected via sensory networks and global device grids. And I refer often to the AlphaGo, which is the self-learning computer who mastered the complex Chinese game of Go. And the reason why was because it understood its surroundings and took the correct course of action to solve the most complex problem. Why would we be worried if a self-learning computer can assist us in probing and solving complex matters? Why would we be worried about it? It won't take anything away from my mind if that happens. It's happening. Matter is, do we want to dance with this megatrend? Automation is the link to hyper efficiency by replacing humans with machines. The mining industry is a great example. Should we be saddened by it? Well, if we think of taking responsibility of giving people jobs to stay alive, we will be saddened by that. But I'm not sure that's my task to give you a job. For that matter, I'm not sure that's the task of political parties and of ruling parties and of governments to give people jobs. That's an outdated construct. Why will I want you to give me something while I've got all the brain capacity to create what can be truly me? Virtualization is creating a digital version of everything possible. For example, moving from routers to hosting the data in the cloud that we knew via software networks, SDNs. I mean, I could imagine that 20 years ago, I would not have anticipated this happening here today, that we can talk the way we're talking, that data can be stored in a cloud. And what does that mean? I must admit, even for me, it's a tricky construct. Rian and Alpheus, who's in this discussion, will share with you that probably Ben doesn't understand anything about it. Well, I don't. But I just accept that it's possible conceptually. Anticipation is a last mega trend where it's all about computers anticipating our needs long before we know what we need. Now, could you imagine if we had a team of computers having watched over South Africa, being utilized by communities and say, what do you see is the current state of flow of people? What do you see is the current state of socioeconomic disruption? What are the pointers? What are the algorithms? I wonder if we would have had the disaster that we experienced in the last 10 days. Now, Google Now and Google Home are typical intelligent digital assistants. Yes, they are still programmed to a large extent. If I go to Citibank in New York and I want to see the CEO, there's a intelligent digital assistant that will greet me at the door and say, good morning, Ben. You've got a meeting at 11 o'clock. Would you like to have some tea? Because that intelligent digital assistant will know that I like green tea. Why will we bother about this? Why will we be worried that it will take the role of the secretary and the PA in that particular company? We need the mind of that PA to do much interesting other things than what she has been doing for the last 200 years as a PA. So yes, a mega trend like anticipation will also assume that the roles must be redefined in the fifth industrial revolution for what people should do, and that certainly some roles will become obsolete. We don't need a PA. That's a little bit yesterday. I'm not even sure we will need a CEO the way we've got it currently. Because if we all do what we do and we link to some at least of these mega trends, then the CEO actually, has got a different role for the future. So maybe I want to pause here for a moment and ask, Marla, do we have time to take a question here or some comment if needed?
Yes, we definitely do. I have put a comment in the chat. If anyone wants to unmute your mics or raise a hand, put a question in the comment box, you're welcome to.
So maybe I want to ask Buyani Zwane, I want to ask you, what do you hear about these mega trends? Buyani, are they real for us, or are we still stuck in the first and second and third industrial revolution?
Well, the trends are real. They are pretty much what we are experiencing as we go along. However, there is much that is a replaying of experiences of the previous decades. And there's a necessity for us to be able to reposition in terms of how we anticipate the future. So in the stating of the fifth industrial revolution, the terminology itself is asking us to be able to question, would a Generation Z person be excited by the terminology of revolution? Or would they be wanting us to be talking about something that is more synergistic, something that is more co-created? What would they be looking for? So trends, absolutely. As listed, or 5 play a big part. But I think the last one you've got in terms of participation becomes the thing that we in the education space in particular and in business get to be known for if we are to be taking charge of the future.
Yeah. And let's hope that we can all, for those of us, I mean, you put it very eloquently, you know, how do we respond to the future? How do we anticipate it? You know, for us who wants to see the future, I hope that we can talk more about this. And when we hear people talking towards yesterday, that we should make comment about it, because we must talk about tomorrow.
Maybe, I mean, if I may, Prof, what is really critical if we're looking into late millennials and Generation Z is how content creation is something that they play in. And therefore, the future becomes one where we actually have more of the participation of the people who are going to be consuming what is given to them. And they actually get to be in a supermarket environment and have an a la carte menu and want to be able to do things that suit them, not what we have preset for them.
Yes. Now, thanks for that, Briani. I want to respond to Wim Britz's comment and say, how do we look, you know, in job creation in Africa? Well, Wim, bear me. I want to say, why do we continue, or should we continue, supporting the notion that someone in power should give a job opportunity or create it for other people? I know this is a complex debate, but I wish we can give power to people and say, and challenge them to make contributions, as opposed to us creating jobs, because job creation has created a power base for politicians and governments to keep people in the main dependent on them.
And I think, Ben, what's also critical around Wim's comments is if we do go that entrepreneurial route, then I definitely think that the upskilling of things like business skills and those areas that often lead to entrepreneurial failure is also critical in the development of that kind of a framework. So creating employment is a critical aspect for self, but I do think that offering some kind of skills or knowledge base and those type of things to sort of co-create a form of learning and development for people.
Yeah. So Wim, I think this is a debate that we should have, because we're not talking about this, and I'm glad that you raise it. But we must really interrogate that notion with different role players, so that we can hopefully open up and let people's minds open up to the reality. I've got something to do. I don't need to wait for somebody to do it for me. For time constraints, I'm going to go further. Now I don't know what is the next slide that I see, but I'm not sure I like what I see, because that doesn't look right. But let me ask this. You know the old game, and maybe, can you just give us that next slide, Alpheus? Alpheus?
Can you see it, Ben?
No, I can't.
Cool.
Is it the slide connecting the dots?
This one here, yep, that's one.
All right. So let's just, so you don't have the one just with the 9 dots?
Just 9 dots. Let me take a look quick.
But I don't want to waste time on it. But let me just say the construct here is, we all know that game. You draw 9 dots. You ask yourself to connect those 9 dots with 4 straight lines. The sad thing is that in 90% of our students, which are degree students and masters and even PhDs, in 90% of the case, people try to connect the 9 dots. Maybe it's because the instructor said connect. But by connecting it, you can never be able to use 5 lines to connect those 9 dots. You can't. You'll always miss 1 dot. But if you go beyond the boundaries of the 9 dots, then suddenly you are able to connect the 9 dots by collecting additional dots that nobody told you about. Nobody instructed you. Nobody demarcated them. All that he did is saying, go beyond, connect the 9 dots. There we see it. Go beyond, connect the 9 dots. And then you suddenly are able, by collecting what you see in your mind's eye that maybe your neighbor can't see, and then you're able to connect those 9 dots and you make magic, and you actually get about 108 configurations. Now, I always talk about the 9 plus 12. Are you and I wanting to go into the future? Are we people who want to collect and thereby create more possibilities? Or do we want to get stuck with one possibility which actually not complete by connecting the 9 dots? I want to leave it to you. You make the decision. You make the choice. What I hope is that we will be more interested in collecting what is possible, which is not necessarily directly observable, in an attempt to create more opportunities. But that requires that you and I will challenge each other and break our brains and open it, and to have difficult conversations. Because if we don't, we'll keep connecting and we'll get stuck with yesterday. I don't know if anybody has a comment on this connect and collecting. If not, I don't know. Unati, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, certainly, Prof. I think the time we've allocated on this topic is probably not sufficient, because there's a lot that we can certainly discuss. But my comment sits on the opportunity to combine, most of our organization purposes with the creativity that the 5th Industrial Revolution presents us, as well as challenging us as business leaders to think differently. And as you correctly pointed it out, that I think the business of today and the business of tomorrow cannot we have to combine all these things. I think I like the analogy of connecting the that's basically my comment. But I have a question at the same time, Prof.
Yes.
In a country such as ours, where unemployment rate continues to be a challenge, one cannot talk about the 5th Industrial Revolution without reflecting on unemployment rate in South Africa, and ask the question as to how do we strike the balance of creating employment that requires probably both the hands and the heart and the minds of the people of this country, as well as the technology. And perhaps I would like to hear your reaction on that, as we need to rebuild the country in order to grow businesses to compete globally. Thank you so much.
All right, I'll make a short comment, and I hope we can talk offline more on this, but my response is simple. Unati, if we get stuck with the 4th and any of the first 4 revolutions, industrial revolutions, we will not create much in a sustainable manner. The 5th Industrial Revolution particularly wants to say, talk to me, recognize me, respect me, challenge me. Because if you do that, you may find power in my brain, and that I can co-create with you some solutions, which you don't need to do on my behalf, but which we will jointly create together. So I'm of full belief. I am not worried if I say I don't want to create jobs for people, not even in our own country. What I want to do is enlighten people so that their brain can start seeing, I've got a role to play. All the developments that has been destroyed in the last 2 weeks is partially because people have not been involved in it. It's things that we have done for people. So call me an idealist, But I want to believe if we really honestly engage people and challenge them to the core of what we are here to do, we will find a different conversation and we'll get a different engagement. And then I need to be less worried and preoccupied as a government of how am I going to look after the masses. Well, you should, government, facilitate an engagement that should enlighten people. You do not need to be a semi-god to create these jobs. Stop wanting to create them, but start taking accountability to enlighten people. That brain is not dead. That brain is maybe muted because of many reasons, politically and otherwise, but it's not dead. So we can talk about it, but that's my short answer to you on that one.
Thank you so much.
Can we go to the next slide? I just want to then talk about, sorry, Mike, you also had your hand up.
Thanks very much, Prof. Prof, I think we can accept the inevitability of a move into 5IR, but the reality is, and the challenge facing us, I guess, would be how do we get to work influencing people, saying it's not that bad. People are going to be at the front and center of the new production process. But the reality is that they've been through the fourth industrial revolution, and that's presented challenges. So how do you believe we as business leaders need to go forward, trying to influence and almost cajole people into a new dispensation that possibly threatens, or as they perceive it, threatens their existence?
So Mike, let me try, and I'm going to maybe be totally off the line now, but let me try. Do you think Singapore in 1960, as a fisherman's village, considered manufacturing as a way for the future to create jobs?
Sorry, is that a question to me, Prof?
Yeah, or to anybody. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
No,
I guess not.
No. Is Singapore today, 50 years later, one of the 5 most economic productive communities in the world? Yes.
Without a doubt.
I just want to leave you with that. Malaysia has got a combination of some manufacturing, but also services. But Malaysia built their future since 1990 on a dream. And Matia took his people with him, but he's not deciding for his people. So there are examples of communities that went forward without going the typical let's build factories. Let's put people in pigeonholes and let them get a meager salary and be happy. Sweden, where I originate from, was a poor country 100 years ago. Did they anticipate building factories? No. So why are they now one of the 5 most competitive countries in the world for the last 20 years? That's the thing that I'm concerned about. So we get stuck with this big number and we want an immediate solution and we just say, hang up guys, I'll get you something. I'm not sure. I think we must break through that glass ceiling. And I literally mean break through it. But not Singapore, fisherman's village, not Malaysia as a poor country in the 1990s. They were number 50, they were number 17 or 18 on the competitive world ranking list. They're now under the top 5, 6, 7 sometimes. South Africa, we must decide how we're going to deal with this. But I'm not sure that this industrialized manufacturing, production, making things industry is necessarily the solution. I'm not sure, if I may. So Mike, I hope we can talk about this again, but that's my short comment. If we go on to the second last construct that I want to talk, because I'm aware I'm running out of time, is the notion that Snowden and Kurtz, and Snowden being one of our faculty of recent, developed the Canadian framework, and the history is very much built on the Canadian Indian people that actually are the people who generated this framework for us today to utilize. And in simple terms, it's about knowing that the world consists of unordered, ordered, and disordered energy fields. The ordered energy field, as you can see there, is when you believe everything is known and simple and we can categorize it and we're on top of it and we're in control. Or it's knowable but yet complicated. We do an analysis of the interrelationship and then we know what to do. Well, those are the typical ordered realities that I see in workplaces, even today in the main. But if we could make the work and the society a place of unorder, where we acknowledge complexity, where we rather probe than telling people, where we allow the emergence of things that we can't see but we could see, where we allow a beautiful chaotic engagement and we play with positive energy. If we can balance the order and the unordered as part of our daily routine, we will all prevent the development of disorder. Because it's when you get an overlay of order or unorder that you create disorder. So it's like a juggler. Can you and I, going into the future as knowledge workers, can we see ourselves playing with 3 energy balls, order, unorder, and disorder, and allow all 3 of them to work with each other, very aware and cognizant of their impact if we allow any one of those to overrule the other. And I'm just running through this in short, but this to me is a critical conceptual framework that we can play with as people within the 5th Industrial Revolution. The next slide, Alpheus, goes to the notion of how do we appreciate. Are you guys there?
Yes, Ben, it's on energy flow, the Yark model.
So if I can just see the slide, if we can play with the notion as a next construct, the energy flow and the social interaction. And if we look at this framework, then we see that there's, if the energy flow is low and the social interaction is low, you see a coordinated workplace where there's a chief executive in the middle or a head of a department and all the other people are subjects and subordinates. They take charges, they wait for the CEO or the government or God or the priest to give orders. That's what we spoke to earlier, Mike and Buyani. Then somebody would say, well, I'll give you a job. I'll organize it for you. I'll do things for you. Well, that coordinated space assumes low interaction, energy flow, and low social interaction. It's not sustainable in a modern world where people are enlightened. But if you get more energy flow and more social interaction, you get the development of a more collaborative engagement. It's more open, there's more flow, people challenge, people questions, people engage. There's less dependency on somebody in the center, although there's still somebody holding it. And I've often seen with collaborations, if you've got partnerships, I've got a partnership with Buyani at his company. Tomorrow, Ben passes on COVID, and people ask Buyani in 3 months' time, well, how's the relationship with Da Vinci? And Buyani says, well, it's difficult because Ben passed away. That's what collaboration does. It makes you still dependent on a somebody to keep that flow going. So I'm very nervous when people talk about collaboration, because you're still trapped with the energy built around an individual or an entity. But if you go full energy flow and you go full social interaction, you get what I refer to as a cooperative engagement, a network of knowledge workers, where I don't need anything from you and you don't need anything from me. But we mutually want to give what we have. We don't send you a bill because you ask me something and I shared some of my so-called expertise. There's no concern about patents and intellectual property. Is it an idealistic world? Yes, it is. But in a world where we're knowledge workers, we've got no need to keep something for ourselves. Because what's the benefit? There's no power anymore. So in the fifth industrial revolution, in a society that becomes more enlightened, we are all part of a knowledge team which wants to give to each other. We've got multiple relations, but I don't need. I've got no need. I only have an intent to give, to challenge, and to share. The last one is about the TIPS framework, which has got some underpinnings of some of these constructs. And in the main, and for purposes of time, Marla, I'm just going to run through it at a high level. To really embrace the fifth industrial revolution at Vinci over the past 30 odd years, we've learned from about 1,800 companies what is the relationship between managing your technology, managing your innovation, and managing your people in a systemic way. And if you connect those and collect the interfaces between those three, we see that people who are good in managing their technology and their innovation processes, that they tend to develop an agile workforce. People who are very well focused on managing technology and people, they are very aligned to the newest developments. And people are managing their people well and reconnect with innovation, creates a more engaged workforce. So the constructs of agility, alignment, and engagement becomes critical driving forces in ensuring that you become an active participant, knowledge worker within the potentially anticipated fifth industrial revolution. So I think that's at a high level that I want to say. I see our time is running out. I don't know if there were any urgent questions, Marla.
Ben, I don't see specifics. Vim made a comment earlier, which is that we have huge opportunities to reach millions of the pre-employed people with entrepreneurial training and speaking to things like the micro-learning, short-targeted, highly contextual messages, which I think is critical. As we often discuss, that micro-learning has become a huge part of training people.
Marla, is that a comment or a question?
No, it was a comment, but I mean, in terms of Vim has put a question mark, but I think it's more, you know, Vim, you can speak if you'd like to, if it was specifically a question or you just making a comment, because I see it more as a comment.
Yeah, let's see it as a thinking question.
Yes, agreed.
So Vim, just rephrase it for me, because I can't see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that we talk about the megatrends and the technology and all the things that's happening, and you know, my concern that I raised earlier about people, the jobless or the people, the pre-employed, the people that doesn't have work. If we can send or transmit messages on mobile devices,
Yes.
Most of them has got mobile, millions of mobile devices, short micro learning tips, hints, how to start a business, where to contact certain business people, how to enhance your own growth by using YouTube, things like that, small bits of information, giving them hints. I think that can be valuable, because that, you know, instead of sitting all the time on Facebook or Instagram, which I suppose also has some value, but specifically training opportunities, small.
Well, then we are experiencing in the program that we're doing with the Gauteng, help me, Trishan, if you're with us, with
TCRA Region Academy.
TCRA. And what we're seeing is more of this that you're talking about, that mobile device make people more mobile. And it touches on some of the other mega trends. And it's how do you get that fluidity? How do you get that flow of conversation and engagement going? as opposed to blocking people in the traditional yesterday boxes and classrooms and seminars.
And just in closing, because of time, I think what else, apologies, that we've seen is even alumnus of institutions, yourselves included, they're wanting something given rather than institutions always asking for things. So please complete my survey, or please do this. So I think your idea with that, Vim, is really great, even for organizations to consider sending out helpful business tips or things like that, regardless of whether they're learning institutions or not. So I think that is a very good point. Ben, I don't see any other specific questions, and we do need to, I think, move on with regards to time, because Unati still needs to present. So what I will do is I'm going to introduce Unati to you now, and then after that we will leave time for questions so that those of you that need to log off because of time constraints, you're welcome to, and those that want to still engage, Prof. Ben will still be online to engage with, and if Unati has got availability, if he could also consider staying online. I think that would be best for time purposes. So thanks for that, Prof. Ben. I did want to just comment and say that as we see the destruction and the rebuilding in our country and the co-creation of communities, I really think it's clear that this construct of co-creation is critical in current times. So before we carry on, I really just wanted to acknowledge and thank you, Mike, and acknowledge Oriel as well for the co-creation of the Southern Africa-Canada Chamber of Commerce in bringing people together to expand our knowledge base, connect and reconnect with one another, hopefully post this. And it's wonderful to see how you actually, Mike, aid in influencing the co-creation of these interactions that I really believe can lead towards a community of practice where people, going to Vim's comment, grow and develop through learning from one another in small sort of bursts of learning. So thank you for that, to you, Mike, to Ariel, and to your team.
Thank you very much.
I always love it when I get to introduce someone that, although I don't have a personal relationship with, that I'm able to, through reading up about them, through understanding certain aspects, that I'm able to introduce someone who aligns with things so incredibly well. And Unati, when looking up some of your stuff, that's exactly what happened. So you would have seen from Prof. Ben's last image that the management of people, innovation and technology in a systemic way is what we hope that you would have got out of the discussion, part of the discussion from Prof. Ben. And this is something that much research actually shows is critical for managerial leaders. And it's wonderful to see a leader like you, Unati, as the managing director of McCain Foods South Africa, a servant leader who really focuses on putting your team first and co-creating with teams in, as Prof. Ben spoke to, in a cooperative way, meaning that you work alongside them rather than just disseminating power. And I really think that from what I can understand, from what people say about you and from what I've read and from what I can just gather in terms of your strategic positioning on things, you are really an authentic, inclusive leader that wants to actually impact people's lives and make a difference. I know you've got over 20 years experience in the FMCG industry, working for brands like PepsiCo and SAB, and now McCain. And I think that what I found fascinating is how you're driven to implement purpose-led business models that have a clear, sustainable profitability trajectory, which we all know is really important, but you also want to leverage the potential of a company's resources, its knowledge workers, to create business strategies that would actually lead to sustainable organic growth in collaboration with customers and communities. I think the quote that I loved most that I once read about you was where we said that somebody said about you, he has a thorough understanding of the value chain from the farm to the fork. And most importantly, he's a people-centered leader. Now that really bodes with working towards the co-creation and towards influencing sustainable societies, which is critical in my view in rebuilding and future building our country. I think you're a maverick with innovative business strategies and understanding that a strategy is not only about goals, but has a systemic nature to grow and build businesses. So without further ado, I introduce to you what I would term an agile, aligned, and engaged leader, Mr. Unathi I just pronounced your surname right, Mhlatyana, the MD of McCain South Africa. My apologies, Unathi, I got tongue-tied there.
No worries.
And thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doc, for those kind words. I really appreciate that. As I said to Prof earlier, it's a pity we're out of time or allocated time for this session. It would have been great to expand even further. But what Mike briefed me to really do is to really give vote of thanks to everyone right here. And it's my privilege and really an honor to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Chamber as well as the organizers of the session. So, you know, in the words of, you know, Nelson Mandela, you know, most things seem impossible until they are done. And I think the work that Prof was reflecting on today, when we're talking about the fifth revolution, they seem impossible, but certainly when we apply our minds to it, there's no doubt that they certainly can be done. And I really want to give a special thanks to Professor Addison and Dr. Mala for such a thought-provoking, you know, topic, as well as, you know, emphasis on the mega trends that are facing us as business leaders today. And I hope that we are all inspired by all the great words, as well as the inspiring topic. I wish, Mike, that we had a lot of time. Finally, I would like to really encourage you, Mike, and your team, as well as the Chamber at large and the members of the Chamber, to continue to gather for topics such as this one and many more that you've organized in the past. And I'm sure that you're going to do more in the future. And I know that you know, it's not easy to put together all the logistics, considering the current environment and the difficult times that we're operating in. But I want to say thank you to you, thank you to the speakers, thanks to your team. Ngiyabonga enkosi on behalf of the Chamber. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Unathi. Dr. Mala, thank you for those remarks. On behalf of SACENCHAM, we are just inspired by the profile of our members, and we remain moved and driven to try and deliver on your expectations of us. So I urge you, we have another webinar coming up on Tuesday, the 27th, where we will be hosting JP Landman, the well-known political analyst, known for his rather robust and thought-provoking views. So please join us. So watch for further information in your inboxes. And finally, from my side and on behalf of SACENCHAM, to Prof. Anderson and the team at Vinci, thank you so much for an incredible session. I think Unathi's encapsulated everything that everybody feels today. So from my side, thank you again, and please have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.